source and power that is beyond and within everything here tonight. And I am one with that. And I know that everyone here is one with that lovely excitement and that energy that is forthcoming and present in here now. And I know that there is combined knowing and intelligence that is here, that flows through each of us, individually and together. And I know that tonight, as we seek questions, as we have answers provided for us from within, from that voice within, that we know intuitively that the truth is here with us now. I give thanks for this good, and I say, and so it is. So everyone, welcome.
Is that a shirt?
I can already tell that I'm not Barbara. Right?
New sheriff in town.
Yeah, new sheriff in town. Yes. Oh, that's right.
You gotta stop that.
So anyway, Troward, and I know that you all haven't had an opportunity to read it yet, and many of you are getting it just tonight. We've had several people pick up the book. So we're going to do some introductory stuff tonight for sure. They're asking you in the book, in the booklet, in your workbook, to read chapters 1, 2, and 3 for next week, right? And then, let's see, I have a list of things I would like to achieve. So, intro of me, just, most of you know me, just because you've been coming here. I'm one of the new, we're going to be one of the new practitioners until our new class graduates in 2 years. So, that's how that's going to go, and that's fine, you know. But I love Troward. And I do. I love Thomas Troward. I love the logic, and I love his what appears to be illogical. Like you're reading it and you go, what? Like what? And then you just sit with it, and all of a sudden that truth kind of comes to it. And that's what I hope that we can do here in these classes over the next 8 weeks, and is discuss it. Because I learned from other people, and how exciting is it that we have people here who've had Troward many times, who've read much more than I have, like Charlie and Nina, and just people who've been in Troward classes like Margaret. I'm just excited that we have this great breadth of knowledge here so that we can all learn from it. And Jeannie Summers as well. She says she hasn't read Troward, but she's got that insight going on. So with all of that, we can have really good discussions, I believe. And it's not going to be homework per se. However, if you want to get the certificate, I encourage you to do the homework associated with the reading. And that you, at the end of the 8 weeks, you can miss 2 of the sessions. 6 out of 8 need to be attended. And then you can talk to us, we get your information. You give us, what, about $45 or $50, you get a certificate for attending the class, which is one of the accredited classes that you need for practitioner training, right? So if you want to do that, keep coming, and if you don't want to do that, keep coming. That's what I tell my students at Haywood, it's like, don't drop the first week because you don't know what's coming after. It gets better and better, right? The class just gets better and better as we get closer. So that is me, really, within the introduction to the class. But since we kind of have a small group, I want to start with one thing. I know that you've all been thinking 2 things. I lie frequently, but I do it with good intent. 2 things. One, I want you to take one of these pieces of paper, and as you've been thinking about coming to this class, what's the 2 questions that you've been thinking about? Like, who is Troward? What do I want to learn? That kind of thing. What is it that you want to get out of this class? And then I want these back, and so that I can read them over the next couple of days, so that I can make sure that we go on track with the track of the class, right? With what people's intent of being here is. So that's the first thing. Just write a couple of things. You don't have to turn them in right away, but definitely before you leave tonight. A couple of things, 2 questions that you have about this class that you would like to learn. And I walk around a lot. I'm trying to keep my boundaries to the blackboard because that's the camera, so. Okay, Nancy, she's like, oh God. Here's the other thing. Troward, in my experience, is all about repetition. Troward likes you to know what you want, and the more you say something, the more realization you get from it. And the more it becomes a part of your soul or a part of who you are. Does anyone need any more paper? Or you all need more paper? Yeah. And so, this is something else that I was thinking about. I want you to think, well, I'll give you a couple minutes to write your questions. I thought people would take an hour or so to write the questions, get into Troward, and then write your questions. So write your questions, and then we'll go on. We can pass them up now. As you're done, we can get them off the table. Thank you. Can I turn down the heat a little? I turned down the fan, but it's like 81 in here. How do I do that?
Bring the wheel down. Bring the wheel down.
70, okay.
Doing it slowly.
Is there something else that we need to do with it?
Got it.
No, I turned it on.
It's actually cooled down in here. It's working.
Yeah.
Everybody keeps saying everything's so cold in the States.
Do we put our leaves on it?
No, you don't have to. If you want to, you can, but you don't have to. Hello, God?
We found a good segue in that's
Come on, buddy.
Yeah, we had a great time. We went through- Yes, well, she's so little.
I didn't mean it. I mean, I didn't wonder it. Now I did. Learned my
Just
lesson.
pass them on up. If you've got a couple questions, then you do.
It takes one bad person to really make everybody else look good.
I don't know, my rebellion have to. My rebellious nature is also a result of
Sure, if you don't put your name on, she's not gonna know that you really want it. Now she does.
I'm pretty sure she knows.
She's
what
gonna
it
know. Mine.
Okay. Well, while we're doing that, I'll do this. Well, no, I'm not. Okay? There are some people still writing. So the next thing is, like I was saying, Troward is kind of about repetition and examining our belief systems. And one thing that Troward says, and he's very, very clear about, is that much like our guy, Ernest Holmes, that when you think it, it becomes true, right? In that sense. And if you want to manifest, you really have to believe in that. Because you have to feel it, you have to envision it, you have to know it to be true from the moment you say you desire it. And that doesn't only go for money, right? Money is like the least of our worries in here. The truth is that it's about love. And love, that expression that we have of energy that we give out. And that's what Troward focuses on. It doesn't always seem that way because Troward is so analytical. You know, he's a retired judge and he's British, so he has a little bit of that stilted language, but he's got this great cynical sense of humor. And that's what makes him so unique. And so, but he's got a passion, and he believes in what he knows as the truth. And I tend to agree with him. So this is something that I do, that I have found helpful for me, and I'm going to encourage you to do it as well. I cut these and I make them as bookmarks, right? I'm going to ask you to really take another moment and reflect what you would like to get. What in the next 8 weeks, what would you like to manifest, right? Different from the prosperity series. This is yours. This is not coming up here and saying, you know, I found 20 bucks on the sidewalk, which is very exciting and very cool. But this is all about you. Troward also believes that we don't tell people, right? That when we go, when we desire something, we envision it, we think about it, we treat for it, and then we go on our way, knowing that it is already so. And we're going to talk about how that process unfolded for him. But, so what would you like? Would you like a new car? Do you want more loving relationships? Do you want $10,000, $20,000 sitting in a bank account somewhere? Keep it to yourself. Use it as a bookmark as you read through the book. And read it every time you open up that book, and then continue on with the book, and then keep reading it and reading it and reading it, right? Every time you open the book. And remember that this is what your goal is to manifest by the end of this class. You guys might need some more. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that? Okay. Will someone make sure Nancy gets one down there for me? And then, any questions to these 2 assignments so far? Anyone feeling a little over pushed yet? You're good? All right. What? So much homework. Right now, we're going to take that moment and know for yourself what it is that you would like to manifest over these next 8 weeks. And go ahead and write it into that bookmark. It can change. You might get it by the end of the week, and then you write another one and do it again. So I think there's enough paper. You can have a couple of sheets if you want. Okay. All right, ready to go on? Okay, so the book, let's talk about the book for a little bit. Because some of you have picked up the Edinburgh and Dory lectures that we're selling here. Some of you have an old book that just is the Edinburgh Lectures. Some of you have the combined works. Some of you, like me, I have all of those because I love Troward and I'm kind of a fanatic. Downloaded it from this website. So none of our page numbers are the same. So when we're talking, we have what we're really grateful for. Hello.
Hey, gorgeous.
Hello. What we're really grateful for is that the chapters are short. So if you want to talk about a specific quote, count out the paragraphs and say in the middle of the 5th paragraph of chapter 1, Spirit and Matter, like that. And that way we can all kind of fly to the same area because we're all using different resources. So we'll just do it that way and see how it works over the next couple of weeks. Okay? So I wanted to say that about the book. But again, you know, it's free online. So from this center, which is an amazing gift that Center for Spiritual Living gives to us. So Thomas Troward, many of us know him. right? Not personally, but I think I may be a reincarnation of Troward.
Wow, cool.
It fits, don't you think? So, he's a retired judge. He was born in Sri Lanka, you know, was raised over there, but went back over to England to attend a primary school, went back over to India. But when he retired, he went back to Britain and he started writing. But in the meantime, he learned like 4 to 7 languages, right? He was multilingual in all of those languages. He studied all of those religions from the base up. Like he was looking at original texts that he taught himself, and he learned how to read several of the original texts. And then when he went back to England, he was like, most of the problems that he tended to resolve ended up being religious differences or based in some of those cultural differences, because India alone has over 1,400 languages, 5 primary languages, and then thousands of dialects that aren't even recorded. So when they're trying to communicate, and they're coming from different villages, not only do they have different subcultures and cultures and religious practices and superstitions like we do here, just coming from the East Coast to the, going from the East Coast to the West Coast, but they're doing it within one country that's fairly unstable at any rate. And so we have a British judge hanging out, right, overseeing the indigenous peoples and trying to help them solve their problems. And so he took that very seriously. And what he learned from that was that it's based in these religious differences in a nutshell, right? And I know that there are people who can explain much more, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that, to inform us of some of the other characteristics of Troward. But he did that in a nutshell, and then turned around and wrote these amazing books upon reflection of that, of those incidents. And what he came to was that there's only one God, right? No matter what we call them, and there's only one life, and that life, and Ernest says that now, that life is our life now. And that life is exactly what we make it. That we have to be able, according to Troward, to understand. He says, let me give you a quote here. He says, let him that readeth understand, a gentle reminder of the necessity to not only read, but also assimilate the information. So we can read and read and read, but unless we take it to heart and practice it, then it just stays out here, right? And when he was criticized, he wrote a poem. He was criticized by a Catholic writer who scoffed at what we call new thought or new teaching. And so he wrote a poem to him. This kind of gives you an idea of that British sense of humor. You look like a British man, are you?
No, I'm Jewish.
You're Jewish. There you go. Very. You'll appreciate this. So, do people consider it cheeky to call our ideas higher thought? Then tell them the purpose of thinking is to learn to think as we ought. If our thoughts don't get steadily higher, retrogression is surely to ensue, until we come back to the monkey from which Darwin tells us we grew. So then, ever your thoughts should be higher, unless you would return to an ape, and to have a higher thought as your center is the only way to surely escape. Right? That's attributed to him when he wrote back to this guy called C.K. Chesterton. And, you know, I couldn't find any resource for it, but it sounds like someone who's kind of got that cynical British edge to them might write. I'm not sure. But I like that because it tells me exactly what I'm doing. So he also says one other thing. Perfect love casteth out fear, and he that fear is not mad perfect in love. It all comes back to love, in my opinion. And so that's where we're going to start with this review of mind and matter, spirit and matter. And do you guys have any questions? Charlie, would you like to add anything about Thomas Troward? Or anybody who's had many of these classes? He had one student that he approved of, And that book, there might still be a copy back there. Her name was Madeline. Genevieve Baran. And that's a great book, and she takes her title from that, from one of his works that were published after he died. And his is the hidden power, and hers is the silent power, or is it the other way around?
Hers is the invisible.
Invisible power, right? And we have one copy of that. That's a great book. Jenny just gave me that, told me about that book, and so I've been reading that. Would you like to say anything about Troward? You've had this class before. Tim, Kate, anybody? No one wants to say anything about Mr.
I'm gonna
Troward?
ask a question about the time period that he lived in.
Okay, when did Troward live, actually?
Yeah.
So Troward was born in 1847 and died in 1916. Most of his works were published after 1905. The Edinburgh Lectures are 1909, but some people attribute it to 1906 or 1905. I think it depends on where you pick the book up. I'm not sure how that works back then. I don't know. So does that make him a 19th century scholar or an 18th century scholar?
What were the years he did?
I didn't know.
1847.
I would say he's a.
1847 to 1916.
Well, he crosses over.
He does cross over, but when we're thinking of the books of the time and what he learned on, right?
It would be 1920s.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, 20th century,
Yeah.
so 19th century and the 20th century. Do I teach?
I think so.
I do. So, okay. Then on we go. Are you ready? No questions yet? Any other questions, Selena, about the history? Because you like that. You like details. I miss our class. I do. Okay. So he selects spirit and matter as the starting point because this is key to understanding the rest of his work. And we ask ourselves, like, what's the difference between spirit and matter? And I ask you now, is there a difference between spirit and matter? What is the difference? It's a perception,
Matter is spirit and manifestation.
right? Matter, because we have a lot of people who've been in New Thought for a while, so this is not new in that sense. Matter is spirit and manifestation. Other people,
Matter seems heavier to me.
matter is heavier.
Don't know if that's true or not.
I think that's a good point. That's a good comment. Yeah.
Spirit is in the thought form, and matter is in the physical.
Okay, so a little bit more of what, sir, I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dennis? Dennis Klein?
Yes.
Oh, cool, okay, now I know who you are. Okay.
What have you heard?
It just clicks in once the names are put with the faces, right? It's one of those weird Facebook things. You see all these names and then you actually meet someone and you go, it's you! So, what else? Spirit and matter. Yeah, Jackie.
Matter is thought turned into density.
Right? Okay, same thing? Yeah, in another way. Anything else? Yes?
To me, spirit is a higher frequency than matter.
Okay, it's a higher frequency. And then what? What does that mean? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
It just takes on, it just encompasses everything, whereas matter is like limited in form.
Okay. So what is the difference then between us sitting here today and like Troward references the apes that we came from? What is the difference in terms of, is there a difference in terms of matter?
Evolution of thought.
Evolution of thought? What is the difference then between that table and a mountain?
Not much.
Not much. What is the difference?
Plastic potatoes, and mountains not.
Size, the size.
Size?
Yeah.
Consciously.
Could the table be a mountain?
Sure.
What were you gonna say, Kay?
Just that, according to Troward, that God is present in His fullness everywhere, so it isn't.
Right, right, so there is no
Spirit
difference.
and matter are all one and the same, just, we see them different, we perceive them different,
that's the key right there, isn't it? It's the perception. It's how we perceive the difference. So we perceive something as being heavier than something else, right?
I think it goes back to how fast the molecules or atoms are moving inside of the matter.
Right. According to science,
Yeah.
right.
But it's all one thing. It's just different because we think of it differently.
Right, exactly
I
that.
said the same thing Kate said, but it's all, everything, spirit is in every piece of matter, so matter comes from spirit.
Right,
It comes from the very essence of, it's the essence, spirit is the essence of creation, and it becomes matter. But it comes together in different molecules, different atoms, it's just put together differently.
it's true, and it is. And that difference happens because we believe it to be true, right?
Mhm.
Because like in this chapter, Troward starts with, he talks about flight, he talks about all sorts of things that have been created over time. And that the truth is, the thought and the materials have always been there. Have they been put together in the same way before? Was no, right? But that doesn't mean that they weren't available for use even before, right? And that, like I've asked you to continue to read your bookmark, like the Wright brothers theoretically didn't give up, right? They just kept looking at it and saying, I want to fly, I want to fly, I want to fly, and it happened, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about. So in a sense, they were able to change the structure of their plane that allowed them to actually take off from Kitty Hawk instead of nosedive into the beach, right? Which is a very cool thing, I think, because if that's true, then we know that one of his main principles is true too. The principle is not bound by precedent, right? Which actually he doesn't talk about until his next book, right? The creative consciousness in the individual. But it's so present throughout this book, principle is not bound by precedent. So that even now, it doesn't matter what's gone before, that we cannot go back, right? So really, in that sense, just in spirit and matter, the past doesn't matter. The past just is not to be. You learn from it, but you go on. But you don't carry it with you, according to Troward. It's done with, it's gone. And so when we're dealing with some of this, we need to know what's back of the issue, right? What's back of it, and something that's very common in science of mind. We talk about what's back of the issue, especially with practitioners. What's back of that? It's what's back of that we take forward, not the actual experience. Does that make sense? And that's what Troward is talking about in terms of higher thought or spirit or science of mind type incidences. That we look at not our behaviors and go, oh, I robbed a bank, I'm a sinner. But why did you rob the bank? Where was the fear or the discouragement or the feeling of unloved or whatever was going on for that incident in your life? You look at that and you take that forward. And that creates the paradigm shift. That creates the new person that you are. Just like the airplane started over here and ended over here a few years later. Does that make sense? So that's essentially, in a nutshell, Troward. You can apply for your certification and see it in about 8 weeks. I don't know how many more times we can say it, but that's about it. I'm sure people will comment. So he says that it's the work, I'm going to just read you some things. This is in the first paragraph of Spirit and Matter. He says, this is the work of an enlightened intelligence, the world, everything we have. Welcome. From persistent determination to discover what truth really is, irrespective of any preconceived notions from whatever source derived, the determination to think honestly for ourselves instead of endeavoring to get our thinking done for us, right? And that goes back to what he was like saying, if you read these books, internalize them. Don't just read them, and then go on and take piecemeal pieces and then ask for financial success without recognizing what's going on inside, right? Where are you? Because when people think that a manifestation hasn't happened, it hasn't happened up here, right? It hasn't happened in the heart. And that's not like a victim blaming thing. It's like an experience that we go through. Because I used to critique science mind all the time. We blame the victim, we blame the victim, we blame the victim. We blame people who have illness. Something's going on with me because I have an infection in my eyelid. You know, you can all see it. And it's like, so what's going on with me? And I can use that to go forward. The appearance is secondary to the point that you learn from, right? And that's what Troward is saying in Spirit and Matter. That this would be matter, and what's going on in my head, and this is what is the out-picturing of that, right? That's kind of it. So when we look at these things, you want to really look at who you are and where you are in relation to the thought, because that's going to be key as we go forward. And with that in mind, as we share in here, and I hope that we do, that we take some experiences and that we just kind of like wrestle with these thoughts, you know, what is going on? You know, what's going on with me? I can share that, and I probably will at some point. But also what's going on with you? Where is it that we can use it as a jumping point? Where this isn't a therapy group, it's not a support group, it's a spiritual, loving group of people that are here to support us to grow, right? That's how I see it, and that's how I see Troward. He's incredibly loving and at the same time intellectual about it. So, and intelligent, smart, just, that's ASL for brilliant, brilliant. So I hope that we do, and that we already have this, because everyone here has already been here and we know some things. But we know that the fish, as Troward says, the boy, the man, the plane are all of the same substance, right? Yes. Ren kind of looked at me and went, we do? And yes, we do, because it is, right? That $50,000 is not that different than perfect health. It's not any different at all. And the joy that you feel at becoming involved with someone is not any different than the joy of finding that, you know, $5 bill on the table. I believe that. There's this, how many of you know what it's like to find that green money laying on the floor or in the room? You see that green and you go, right? Oh my God, it's a symbol of energy, right? We know it from the moment we see it. It's like, money, and we're running in front of traffic to pick up that because we believe it's ours, and if we believe it's ours, we know we're going to be just fine. God's put it there for us. Trucks don't matter. So that's the key. So we know that feeling. And who does that? Oh, that's Edwina Gaines who does that, right? Right, she does that in her workshops. What does that feel like when you do that? You go, you know, everybody do that. I feel like Edwina is channeling right now. Yeah, there's that sense of excitement that just rises up into your chest for no good reason, right? We're going to find something important here over the next 8 weeks. So I hope you have that sense of excitement, for sure. So, serious stuff. The difference between spirit and matter is this. The important part of the distinction is that if we can conceive of anything as entirely devoid of the element of extension in space, then it must be present in its entire totality, anywhere and everywhere. That is to say, at every point in space, simultaneously. That's a mouthful, right? And so, do you want me to read it again? And I'll tell you what paragraph it's in. It's in 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in the 4th paragraph in the middle of it. It's about 5 sentences down. But there's no pages. Oh, in spirit and matter. Oh, you don't have the book. You've got the workbook.
Yes.
No, I'm looking out of the book, out of the Edinburgh Lectures.
Oh, okay.
This is the week two spirit matter.
Yes, I know. It's chapter 1, spirit and matter. Four. Did you find it? The paragraph begins with form implies extension in space and also limitation within certain boundaries. That's the first sentence of that paragraph. Remember, I said we're going to have some difficulty as we go to quote things and stuff, so just bear with it. Everyone's using a different text. So, okay? All right, so we're looking at that. So the important point of this distinction is that if we can conceive of anything as entirely devoid of the element of extension in space, then it must be present in its entire totality, anywhere and everywhere. And that is to say, at every point in space, simultaneously. That the mouse, right before it, it says the mouse is quite as much alive as the elephant, right? Size is immaterial to life. And if it's at the point here, then it's at a point everywhere. And one is not more sacred than the other. One is not bigger than the other, right? Life is no more valid for the elephant than it is for the mouse. Yes?
This is so exciting because
No.
I recently read that St. Augustine actually said this quote about everything exists at every point simultaneously. So he must have gotten it from Troward.
St. Augustine?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be the other way around?
Has St. Augustine been before Troward?
A few hundred years.
Here's an excellent point.
Troward got, my history's not so, I don't know history.
But you just made the point that because something happened before, it happens again and again and again in different form and different ways.
It's a truth.
And, pardon?
If it's a truth.
Because it's a truth. It's one of those principles.
And this, it shows up, this is because we can transform things. We can transform the energy of one emotion with our thoughts, bang, into another.
Can you give us an example of what you mean?
Well, if there's anger arising and I have consciousness, I can just do an interrupt and say, no, I'm going to love. Shh.
Right.
And with training, and that's how shamans do shape-shifting. Just using it's what we got, yet the form is different.
That's exactly true. I agree with you. What do other people think about this statement? How does that work for you? Nina? Jackie? Ginny? Grant? I'm just gonna call on people, obviously. I know everybody's name, I think, except yours, ma'am, and yours.
My name is Bee.
B.
It would be, a problem of my tap leaking is no different than paying my mortgage.
Okay.
I mean, they would seem up here on the surface to be so different and mean everything, and mean different things, but if this principle is true, then there isn't a difference. And if I can wrap my mind around it and trust it, then either one can be harmonious. I don't want to say fixed, but
Right.
doing its thing
Right.
just as easily.
That's a great word, harmonious.
And following with what B said, if I think I'm having a challenge with something like, this isn't working, I can't do it, whatever, then I can just remember something that looks different, but it's the same, that I know that I have no challenge with. And that could be an inspiration to me, to bring that to the present apparent challenge.
Okay, that's a good point. Anybody else want to comment on it? Yeah, Becca.
Well, it kind of takes me that if I acknowledge there is a divine presence, then that divine presence in its totality is me. I mean, that's where it takes me to.
Yeah, exactly there.
It's, if I think that there is a divine presence, then I must be that divine presence.
That's right. We are the center in divine consciousness, right? That's what they tell us in Science of Mind. Yep, exactly. Yeah, Rick and then Barbara?
It kind of reminds me of looking at it from the material side of it. Scientists have discovered that everyone is holographic.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the teeniest, tiniest part of something, that the entire thing is in that little tiny piece.
Right. Kind of like the Matrix?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like the DNA of stuff, you know, the DNA of a hair follicles.
Right.
The entire body is in it.
That's right. Right, Barbara?
I understand what you said. Understand it that way, that spirit is everywhere and I am it. I don't get that there's an elephant in the room.
You don't get that what?
There's an elephant in the room.
There's an elephant in the room?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't, oh, I get it.
I don't get that. I just don't get it.
Okay.
The elephant is here and the mouse is here, but it's in its totality everywhere. That means there's an elephant in the room.
The one that we're not talking about.
That one, I know that one.
Been there, done that.
We all know that one, the elephant that we're not talking about. And that's exactly, I think, in truth, the elephant that we are talking about. Hang on, we're gonna get to that, okay? That's a good point, and I bet you're not the only person here who feels that way. Kristen?
I was gonna speak to that.
Okay.
Well, because he says, the important point of this distinction, this sentence that you just read, if we conceive of anything as entirely devoid of extension in space. So if we can conceive of the elephant as not in space but still being an elephant, that's how it's everywhere simultaneously. So it's the life behind the elephant that's everywhere simultaneously.
Does that make sense? They're good.
That's how I read it.
Someone else over here had their hand up. No? Someone did. Okay, and that's exactly what he goes on to say. At the end, towards the end of that same paragraph, he starts with, therefore, find that the conception of spirit as pure thought and not as concrete form is the conception of it as subsisting perfectly independently of the elements of time and space. Because we believe it to be true, and so it is, right? Any other comments on that? No, everyone is good with that? Everyone's good with the elephant in the room?
Not the mouse, though.
Can you read that? Where was that sentence again? Can you read it again?
That's at the, towards the middle end of that same paragraph. They're big paragraphs. No one edited them. It wasn't me. I was you. And it's exactly what you said, Kristen.
Will you repeat the quote that you just said?
Yeah.
Sure. Therefore, we find that the conception of spirit, which is exactly what Kristen was saying, the conception of spirit as pure thought and not as concrete form, is the conception of it as subsisting perfectly independently of the elements of time and space. From this, it follows that if the idea of anything is conceived as existing, it can only represent that thing as being actually present here and now. So we know an elephant is not in this room, but we know that elephants exist here and now, right? In the same sense, another sense.
And I kind of took it as like, the life that causes the elephant to be is the thing that's everywhere present. So it's that big life that's in the table.
So it's the same, you're saying, if I paraphrase correctly, you're saying it's the same life that's in you is in the elephant, is in the mouse.
Sure.
Is that what you're saying? Life is
It's like a
just
combo of that and the other.
it's the essence of life that's present
Right.
everywhere. Is that it?
Yeah.
But if you're saying that spirit and matter are the same, then the elephant is in the room.
Well, but if you go down to atoms.
Wait, let's see, Rhonda?
Yeah, if you're saying that spirit and matter is the same, the elephant is everywhere.
That's right.
And if you go down to atoms,
That's
we're
right.
all made up of the same atoms. So we could rearrange the atoms in this room to create an elephant.
We could.
And sometimes people do.
And that's where you're talking about shape-shifting.
Right.
Charlie, what do you think? Do you have a thought coming in?
I've been in Troward classes, I understand very little of it, so I don't have.
That's why I like you so much. Yes,
If I
David.
take what Kristen said and tie it into what Becca said, Becca said that in essence, I am everywhere.
Right.
It's all me, and I show up as the leaky faucet, I show up, the big I shows up as Becca, the big I shows up as the elephant, the big I shows up as the paid mortgage, or the unpaid mortgage. There's nobody else in the show,
Right.
you know, so it's all one thing, taking form, whichever way I please.
Right.
And at this level of things, the familiar me, I can use or allow that aspect of myself to take form in whatever way I choose. It's, you know, it's sort of a weird thing because it's just who I am.
Right.
You know, it's just who I am. So it's interesting when I take the two pieces and slam them together at the speed of light. You know, it's just one thing taking form, and it all exists. But I'm sort of like Charlie, get to a point where my mind goes in tilt. So is it really all potentiality, or is it all, I don't want to say reality, is it all in form?
That's a
And
very
I
good
tend to go to
question.
potentiality.
You tend to go with potentiality instead of in form. So Rhonda, when we look at it like that, does that change anything? Are you still struggling with the elephant in the room? If we believe everything is here in spirit and totality now?
Well, I didn't know I was struggling with that.
Oh, I don't know if you're struggling with it.
Yeah.
Because
No,
you
I
know-
hear what he's saying. He's saying that, you know, this is his reality and he's creating whatever he wants to create with that reality, whether it's a leaky faucet or whatever,
Right.
which is we're doing it from our own perspective. But I think that he was saying that everything is here and now in whatever way you want to perceive it. You just have to come to that reality that it's there. It's
Right.
already there, you just don't realize it's there. And so you mentally get there and you get there here, and then it's done.
Okay,
And that's kind of science of mind anyway.
it is.
Saying that you're just saying, I want this, so I know it is now, and therefore it is, and then it is. But you have to mentally be there. So everything is already here, you just have to mentally know it's there. It's kind of like
Okay.
the ship and what the fleet, you know? You
Oh,
just-
right.
Yeah, like it was there the whole time, but they couldn't perceive it. But
Right.
it was there the whole time. So
Right.
as soon as they perceived it, it was reality in their life, but it was there the whole time.
Right. I still don't know if I believe that story, actually. I don't know it. I
But
don't
you were
like
saying
it.
the same thing with the
I know.
airplane, you're saying everything was there.
I
They
know,
just
I
didn't
like the
perceive it, so
airplane.
they
I'm just like, seriously, they couldn't see a ship on the ocean?
But it was
They
too overwhelming
created
for them.
this.
Mentally, it was too overwhelming because they had no perception of anything of that kind.
Right.
And I believe that there's things that are right here in front of us that we just can't perceive because we haven't been taught to perceive that yet.
That makes me go, what's
What's
out
what?
there? We have no clue.
Okay, you had
Yeah,
B,
what
and
about numbers?
then I'm gonna go to Jenny, or it was you, okay. Selena and
I
Jenny.
think what gets us tripped up is he wants us to get away from the idea that there's space and time. And it's really difficult for me to wrap my mind around something where there's no space and there's no time.
Right,
It's just really, that's where I think we get tripped up. He wants us to get away from that.
okay, hang on, B, because Jenny,
Yes, it's exactly what I was gonna bring up, was that supposedly time and space are local. It is not real in the larger picture. And that's what he's saying, it's devoid of time and space.
right,
And if you can start somehow thinking about that, it simplifies things for me.
okay, B and then David.
So Selena was saying the difference between idea and the form.
Okay,
So that helps me, but I know that I'm tied, because my idea of an elephant is tied to the form. If I can perceive that it actually isn't tied to the form, it's independent, it's actually before the form.
okay. Ooh, we hear oohs in the community. That's a good concept right there. I'm going to ask you to write that down real quick, so we don't lose that one. That was an excellent thought. David?
repeat that? She's gonna write
Okay,
it.
she's writing it, and then we'll ask her to repeat it. Is that okay? Okay, let's focus. She remembers. Okay, David, you were gonna say?
It may have been the last time I sat in a class about Troward that I thought about this, but at some point I came up with a sort of an alternative viewpoint. And as humans, we've been taught over eons that there is time and distance, and that was a necessary concept in order for us to have separation, or the concept of separation. Without time and distance, there's no separation. So in order for whoever benefited from us having those limitations, we've learned it. You know, it's been rammed down our throats, and we really, as expressed by a lot of people, have a hard time getting out of that, that concept. But I see a colony of ants going out and doing their thing. They don't know anything more than what's right in front of them. They're not conscious of other individuals. They're all one big unit, as it were.
Right.
One being, I guess. Even though they're acting somewhat independently, it looks like, but that may just be my observation of them. To them, it may not look independent at all. It may look totally cohesive.
Right.
I mean, each of those ants may be an equivalent to like each individual sucker on an octopus's arm, I don't know it from their point of view, but I try to grasp it from the idea that it's just what appear to be individuals to me are actually just all one.
Right. I think that's a great analogy when we see ants doing that. And but then we see them in a single file too, and you take one out and they just keep on going. Yeah, it has no bearing to anything you said. Go ahead. You're gonna repeat what you said. What is your name? I'm sorry.
Eva.
You're Eva, okay.
Just idea versus form. The idea, chicken and an egg, which comes first, the idea or the form? It's the same thing with you in the airplane. The idea of flying, before a plane was just an idea of flying.
Right.
Once a plane came, now we think plane, fly, plane. But the plane is really irrelevant to the flying. I mean, now I'm getting complicated, but it's just.
Now you're starting to sound like Thomas Troward.
It's just that
But does that help? Did that make sense? You asked her to repeat it, but it was more of a breathing.
Something else.
Right.
She did say something else, but it's really the same.
And there were oohs and ahs.
Does anyone like what she said before?
Kristen.
She said basically that if you can remove the thought of the elephant or the idea of the elephant from the actual elephant itself, because the actual elephant itself is irrelevant from the idea,
Exactly what she said will be on the recording. So we have,
there you go.
So she doesn't have to remember because it's already there for us.
That's funny, I'd already thought of that, but I was
Cindy,
thinking,
say it
it's
first.
here in time and space. No, because I like facilitating discussion. There's a reason, and I'm grateful it's going to be there.
Yeah. I think it was.
Thank you, though, for bringing us back to reality. There. Let's go again.
Just to bring some sense into my perceived ignorance, and that is, I don't know how to make a Toyota Prius, but I manifested one and I drove it to class. You don't have to understand all of this to the nth degree and remember it. The key point is that can you treat and bring into your life what you want? And when I get to that point, who cares whether there's an elephant or a mouse in here? I got mouse traps and I haven't seen an elephant, so I'm not worried. So, I'm just interested in having the stuff in my life that I want. So far, it worked.
Right, okay.
Charlie, this is exactly it, because when I first said what I said, it came from within me. When I repeated it, it came from my intellect.
All right,
And that was the difference.
that is the difference. That's good. Good point. And you make a good point, Tim.
I don't know, just the thought came into me, I was trying to come up with a picture. And part of it is coming from the formless into form, of just a thought and knowing. And they sound crazy, but our movies sometimes bring some of these thoughts out. You remember the Terminator?
Yeah?
How this goo, this gel, would just melt and all of a sudden would manifest into whatever it wanted to be.
They were imaginal cells.
You know, so, I mean, it's, that's kind of way out, but I think that the lesson there, or what I see out of it, is that it is, spirit is a formless, and everything that was, is, and ever will be, is already there. It's just our level of consciousness which brings it into being.
Right. And you can't have one without the other. You can't have manifestation of material things without thought or spirit, right? That we agree on that, and that's a good place to take a break and keep thinking about it. How long are the breaks, 10 minutes?
Typically.
Typically, okay.
More or less.
Please come back.
More or less.
Please come back.
Flash the lights.
Barbara rings the bell. Ding, ding. I don't feel that. I don't.
No, John's the best person. She's like, everybody come on back, and she starts calling names.
Oh, yes. Like you over there getting coffee. Yeah, I've been called out that way. Barbara likes to call people out, like, Becca, come on in and find your seat.
It takes 12 minutes for me to smoke a cigarette.
Then we're just saying the difference between me and Barbara and John. How we call people back.
Yeah, they know that certain
Okay, well, let's turn on the recorder. Do the camera.
Lights, camera,
Nancy keeps
action.
going under. Yes. You have a question?
No,
Statement.
an observation.
Observation.
You go like this in a deaf class, and you'd be surprised, we did it in a hearing meeting, and everybody shut off with those hands going up.
Right.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's actually applause. That means applause inside. Yeah. So, but if you come up and you go like this, that means stop it right now. Finish, finish, finish. And let's go on. Yes, Jackie?
So with Becca being outside for a cigarette, could she have thought about that and get just dissatisfied without smoking it?
Pardon?
Oh!
Oh!
Save a lot of money that way.
Can I be satisfied by thinking about smoking a cigarette?
Yes.
Yes, I can. I do that at work. Because I only have 1/2 hour break on an 8-hour day.
And the truth is, whether or not some people smoke or not is immaterial, actually. It's spirit, it's all spirit, it's all energy. If the elephant is the mouse, and the mouse is us sitting here in presence and form, it's all thought connected to matter and spirit. So really, whether we eat meat or not, or if we smoke or not, if we drink alcohol or not, the consequences are in behavior, not in the thing itself, right? If you want to text and drive, well, that's a risk you take. Or you'll be divinely guided and protected, right? It's all in your thought. So, smoke away, my friend. I honor your smoke spirit. So, let's go over some of the rules, and then we're going to go back to discussions. So, the class is going to start at 7. We're going to take a break. Come back, please, because as we keep going, bantering is taking an additional 5 minutes. And that's not a bad thing, because I think that's a sense of community. But maybe if we come back earlier, we can banter and still start on time from the break. You do have a final exam, quote unquote, and a project if you want certification for the class. No, Nancy is saying stop that line of reasoning right now.
Every class that Christy ever did, they did the test together.
So the test was done together, there's not a
Yeah.
test that has to be passed?
Yeah, I'm not gonna give them an exam. You guys aren't like my college students. I'm gonna say, put your books away. I'm not gonna do that. The exam, you're right.
And projects were always optional.
Yes, and you know what? Christy's not here. I'm sorry, I was told it's my class.
Well, you already said the project's wrong.
I'm not arguing, I am
Also, Barbara or
arguing
John's
with the
classes,
administrator.
they don't work that way, so. that's-
No, I know, and you don't have to do a project in order to get the certification. That, I was not saying that I was not going there. I appreciate you putting me in the right direction though. But I would like it, and it would be appreciated if people using Troward use that as part of, and come in and share something of your experience of the class. Much like the bookmark, right? If at the end of the class you want to share what was on your bookmark, what you wanted to manifest over 8 weeks, maybe that's your project that you wanted to share. But some tangible form of, I don't know, spirit rising, right, up to here. And further. And out. So, but you're right, you don't have to. And I'm asking you to read before you come so that we can have that discussion about the different chapters and different paragraphs that come up for people. It just helps with discussion. You know, if you come, this is such a great group, and I hope that you all come back. But it'll only stay this way if we're prepared for discussion, because I give a lot of responsibility to this, to people who come, because you're the people who know what you need to learn, right? I can only help facilitate that. So know that it's not like a therapy group. It's not a 12-step group. Know those things, which I've already stated, but that we're here to share and learn from that and move forward from those experiences. So with that being said, remember about crosstalk, interrupting someone or commenting directly after. If you've been sharing a lot in an evening, maybe you want to listen a couple of minutes before you speak. Hold your thought if you're someone who's been sharing frequently. If not, so that give an opportunity for people who've not shared to have that moment to reflect. Some people don't think as quickly as others, and so just hold your thought a minute, let someone else jump in if they can have that, and it might help change the tone of the discussion, right? Keep it less frenetic or frantic and slow it down a little bit so people have an opportunity to reflect, because that's what we need to do with this kind of work, is reflect on it as we're speaking. So everything, please, when someone shares something in here, we can't guarantee confidentiality, but please try to remember that what people share in here is sometimes at personal risk to their own growth, or they feel a risk when they're sharing. So please try to keep the information in the confines of these rooms. And if you're talking about someone or talking about something you learned in here, try to keep people's names out of it. If you're sharing about someone else's experience and how it touched you, just say someone in the group and keep someone's personal experience out of yours, all right? It's not yours to share with someone else. So in that sense, it's confidential. And let's keep our sharing short as we go forward. But 2 to 3 minutes, let's not dominate like this. I'm like, wow, wow, wow. It's like a soapbox. Let's stay off of our boxes. And we'll have this great class where we learn from each other. I've already learned some things just from that brief discussion on stuff that we haven't read. One more thing, Greasy, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to you, is that you've already found that I'm not going to follow the syllabus per se. We'll do the readings, and I'll go back and we'll cover some of the requirements, and then I'll go forward and we'll go somewhere else. I'm not linear that way, and so I rarely follow my own syllabus that I give my students, and they're like, oh, we're supposed to do this, and I'm like, roll with it, because it all comes together. It all comes together in the end. So just let's trust that process for each of us. You don't have to trust it for me. Trust it for yourself, that you're going to learn and do exactly here what you need to do. And that is my rules. Breezy.
I just had a question, because I don't know if you covered this before I came in. On the course outline,
On the
you
course
know,
outline.
on those things,
Mhm.
like for week 2, it's got spirit and matter, week 3, it's subjective, objective, mind. Those are 4 chapters apart. Are we only gonna do the first chapter and then the 4th, or do we read through the 4th chapter? That sort of thing, that's what I'm trying to make sure. I mean, that's on page 2 in the workbook, if that helps.
Page 2.
No, the homework for week 2 is to read chapters 1, 2, and 3.
But I'm looking at the course outline here.
Okay, but.
Yeah, but
on
that's
week
the
2,
outline, but the assignments are 1, 2,
The
and 3.
assignment is 1, 2, and 3. If you continue
What
further.
page is the assignment on?
It's on this lovely no-page page with my numbers. And then the next page says 2-1, but it's not
I
page
know, I
2
read it.
or 1 or 21.
Yeah, and it didn't know the numbers on the bottom. I don't have that.
I'm glad I don't. I think you're holding it.
No, this has 1.1.
Okay, we'll keep going
And that's 1.2.
to 2.1, so
Oh,
keep
you
going
said
to
2.1. 2.1 and back up 1.
Yes, exactly. You see it?
Not yet.
It's right after the thing on final project.
Just before 2.1.
Just before 2.1. Thank you.
Okay.
I got it down.
It says chapters 1, 2,
And, so like our homework for next week is 1, 2, and 3.
Right.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand it correctly.
Exactly that, and like I'm saying, I'm not, this will be good, you'll keep me on track, you're linear that way, and I'm not. That's what I was just saying.
Well, I do understand you said you're gonna bop around, but I just wanted to make sure I was doing what I was supposed to do, so.
Right.
If it came up, I would
Right.
have it covered.
So that's good. And actually, we're gonna go to, I believe it's 1.6 in your book. We're gonna keep looking at those questions. We've already addressed 1, if something has no form and does not occupy space, why then does it necessarily have to be everywhere? We've already addressed that in our discussion. And how does spirit relate to time and space? We've already addressed that in our discussion as well, right? Does anyone have any more thoughts on that after the break, on the discussion we were having right before we broke? Or before we parted? Broke is such a bad, one of those words. So, okay, what are some other examples that are only thought or only form? Is there anything? Is anything only thought?
Yes.
What? Didn't you said it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Why do you look at
Well,
Kate?
because she said no.
Oh, I didn't hear Kate. I didn't hear Kate. I thought you said yes, and then you looked at Kate like, tell them.
Love, whoever said love, that's a good
Love
one.
is only thought? I don't know, I'm asking you.
I don't see
Oh, I don't think that's true.
Well, it's not form.
It's
There
spirit.
can't be, that's some love.
To me, it's spirit.
You can pick up a rose, which can be a symbol
Right.
for love.
So that's an yeah.
Symbol.
It's a symbol of.
Okay, so we've got a symbol. What are you saying, Selena?
I'm saying love is spirit, pure spirit.
Love is pure
Right,
spirit.
so it's an
that's not-
idea.
So
Well, but
there's
everything
no
is all
matter.
the same, remember?
Wait, what? Breezy?
Everything is all the same, so love is a rose, is a chair, is a table, is the yada, yada,
Right.
yada.
There's a feeling too.
But it's the idea. So there can be things that are only ideas, but there can't be things that are only form. If there's a form, there's an idea behind it. But if there's an idea, there's not necessarily a form that goes with it.
Okay. Anybody else? I would say, yes, Chris.
As a practitioner, we have people come to us and they're requesting treatment for things that are in form a lot of times. And so one of the things and the ways that we look at it as a practitioner is we ask, how is that going to make you feel? And the feelings and emotion is a spirit, is a non-form. And if they're actually looking at what it is I'm looking for joy, or I'm looking for peace, or I'm looking for clarity, those are not things in actual physical form.
Okay.
But having those things manifests the form.
Right.
What was the question again, I'm sorry?
Who said that?
What was the question?
Oh, the question is, are there examples of things that are only thought or only form? And
Actually-
so far, it seems the consensus, or what most people are saying, that there can be only thought, but form requires thought to precede it.
I think actually a bunch of people disagree with me on that.
Pardon?
A bunch of people went, and looked at me, so I don't know that they agree with that statement.
I don't know.
Well, what I was thinking is that, for a lot of these, thoughts, to me, there's an energy or a vibration that is associated with many of them that is tangible to me. And that's a form, but it's not so easy to see, but it's there.
Right. Tell me your name again.
Stephanie.
You're Stephanie. David, you were gonna say something.
Well, I think, it's hard for me to describe this, but I think in quantum physics terms, if one thing depends on another to exist, neither of them can exist without the other.
Right.
And so I'm trying to figure out a way to relate it to a concept like love. It would be difficult, I think, at least for me at the moment, to think of a way to see a physical manifestation of love, but it would be very hard to find somebody who couldn't give you some kind of a description of it,
Right.
probably from their own experience.
Right, and that's where I ended right before the break, is we can't have one without the other. We
Right.
can't have one spirit without matter, we can't have matter without spirit, right? That was my interpretation of Troward, but yes.
Well, I know for me, I do have a physical expression of love. You know, in many of my friends, and especially with Sandy, she's my physical expression of love.
Okay, that's a good point. And I think in some ways it goes back to what Selena said before the break, is that we're looking at molecules, and as soon as our energy changes, things start happening, right? So that's form, right? So can thought, spirit be only spirit if as soon as it's recognized, it starts changing? Then it becomes form. You know, which is what you're saying about your love with Sandy, right?
Yeah.
Kim?
We teach that there is only love. And only from love comes anything else. So however it manifests, it starts with love. Because it can't manifest out of hate, it can only manifest out of love. So whatever it is, in essence, it's manifest out of love. It is love.
Okay. So the answer to the question is then, can there be only thought or only form? No. Okay, good. Well done. No. And they ask for examples, but what is an understanding, and why is it important to science of mind? The understanding of Doctor Who, oh no, I'm sorry, the understanding of time and space.
TARDIS.
TARDIS. How many of you do know Doctor Who? Okay. TARDIS stands for time and relative dimension in space. It's an excellent program about new thought, but it's a deviation here. Why is this important to science of mind? Why did Holmes become so enthralled with this, with Troward? Kate, you were kind of going up.
It's because when we do the spiritual mind treatment, we pray, we know that the thing exists regardless of time and space.
Right.
That you know that there is one light, you know that you're united in that light, and that then you know that the thing you desire is already here, present, even if you don't yet see it. And you're grateful for it already being. So it's outside of time and space. It may take, you may perceive that it takes time. Say you want to manifest, $50,000. It may take time for that to take physical form, but you know you have it. before it ever is manifested. So our prayer is outside of time and space, and yet it manifests in time and space.
What do people, any comments about what Kate is saying, sharing? Because I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, Breezy.
Well, like she said, the thing with us is it's always there, the $50,000, it's there. It's just when our vibration matches the 50,000 is when it appears to us. And so,
That's right.
you know.
When you believe that you can accept it.
So you believe that the openness or willingness to accept it determines whether or not you get it?
It appears, right.
Okay, so Charlie's Prius, you just wanted it and you had it, is that correct? Did you know it was going to be a Prius?
As soon as my wife told me, yeah.
Got directly into form, there you go.
I manifested her too.
That's right, that's right, we've heard that frequently with other people. I'm not gonna point them out. Okay. So they have some other things they wanted me to ask you for the first one. It's in my book, but not in yours. So, let me find them. Because I thought they were interesting, but I don't really like to break people into small groups. I do, but I don't. And then it depends on my thing, whatever that may be.
Oh, that's clear. Thank you for explaining that.
Okay. Okay, so it's all in the summary of my book, and I'm not sure if it's in the student workbook. So, but they say, and it's easier for me to read it than to try to paraphrase it because I've been like trying to prep for this, but their writing, honestly, is not that much easier than Troward's when they're doing stuff. So it's easier for me they is whoever it's the office that created this curriculum, which is different from the curriculum that we had when I took it with Christy. It's slightly different, and I don't have the same workbook.
This was developed by Ruth Hobson.
It's in the front of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is a brilliant mind, obviously. And I'm going to read it rather than paraphrase it. So we're talking about spirit and matter. We've talked a little bit about time and space, and this is just to sum up the class so that we're all leaving on the same page, so to speak. And then we'll talk about it again. When the elements of time and space are eliminated, all ideas of things must necessarily be subsisting in a universal here and an everlasting now. The opposite conception is that of things expressing themselves through conditions of time and space, and thus establishing a variety of relations to other things such as bulk, distance, and direction, or sequence in time. The two conceptions are respectively the conception of the abstract and the concrete, of the unconditioned and the conditioned, or the absolute and the relative. So with all of that verbiage, it's essentially what we've been saying, right? That time and space, you can't have time and space, you can't have one without the other, you can't have spirit without matter. Really, all they did is use a lot of words. Troward's train of thought is a lot of words to bring it back to the one thing, that it all comes back to one thing that we started with tonight. That one thing, right? That feeling, it's the love, whatever other people have said. It all comes back to the thought and creation that we have that comes out of us. And so as we read this stuff, my encouragement is to remember to not get caught up in all of that, but to look at what he's trying to say. In so many different phrases, he keeps saying the same thing. Whether it's conditioned or not conditioned, it's the same thing, right? Whether it's time and space, it's the same thing. Whether or not two conceptions are respective of the abstract and the concrete. It's the same thing. We have to have thought to have matter, and matter can't exist without thought. And that's how we were all created. So when we do those 5 steps of treatment, and we start with God is all there is, God is the creation of everything, God is, and I am, that's exactly what Troward tried to teach us in this first chapter. The spirit and matter is the same thing. And so as we bring it back to science of mind, this is where we want to continue, right? We want to step off from here. And so if there's any question about stepping off from here, then let's keep talking about it tonight, because to step off, we're going to kind of leave some of this behind to get a little more even abstract with what Dr. Judge Troward is saying. Titles, people love them. You know, he's long gone. We could just call him Thomas, but when Thomas is here next week, you know, he might get confused. And maybe Thomas might start, you know, talking or channeling. That would be awesome. He called me right before class, and he just gave me so much love. I just love that man. And so, unfortunately, in my meditation. So, this is another question. Even if it appears dead, is it still living matter?
Yes.
How does that happen?
It still has energy on a microscopic level, on some level, it still has things going on, decomposing or whatever, it's still in the flux.
Okay. So how do we deal with that? We know that intellectually, but how do we deal with that emotionally in our lives? When someone passes or transitions, and we say they're gone forever, or there's so many stereotypes or myths about death. And I know that most of us here probably already passed some of that, but I want to bring us around to those basic thoughts. How is that different?
Well, I know for me that, like when my husband passed away, I was grieving for myself, the life that I had and my experience with him, knowing that he has gone off to the big party and he's doing fine. But when somebody's grieving, it's they're grieving for their loss of that lifestyle or that companionship or that love, or the person they were when they were with that person.
Right. And how do we relate that? How do we relate that to spirit and matter?
Well, the person that gone off is still living.
Right.
I mean, it's just not in a physical body.
Right.
But they're still living. And the person left behind is still living. It's just different.
Right.
They're just doing different activities, different forms. They're not on the same.
It's like they've gone to a different building.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's kind of like they've gone to a different building,
Yeah,
they're living their life and you're living yours.
They're not on the same plane. They're not on the same plane. I mean, you still
They're in the
contact.
education building?
You still contact, but they're not physically in form, not in the
Right.
same form.
Okay.
They're in a different form.
So-
Same energy, but different form.
Anyone else before I go on?
Isn't that quantum physics says that energy, that all the energy that is, it never can be created or destroyed. So it's a matter of changing, and if you equate kind of energy with spirit, it just changes form. It continues to
Right.
manifest
Right.
and create.
Like the butterfly and the caterpillar.
Right. Okay, Kate.
Yeah, I agree with Margaret. I know when my mother passed, I had an extremely hard time with it. And no matter how much I mentally could tell myself that she was in a better place, that she was still living, that she hadn't died, I couldn't pick up the phone and talk to her. I couldn't hug her. I couldn't, have those late night conversations that we used to have. So, yeah, I agree that you may know intellectually that life continues, that it hasn't ceased to be,
Right.
but the way that you're accustomed to it being is gone.
Okay.
And it took me many years before I could reconnect with her in a new way.
Okay.
And so I can still feel her now, but I had to learn to communicate without the telephone,
Right.
without the, late night conversations.
Right.
So, yeah, form,
Okay.
like she said, different form, but she's still alive.
Right. Becca?
For me, what I found that I have done to deal with the death of friends and loved ones is I found that after their physical presence was no longer with me, I would take a part of their spirit and incorporate it into me. I know some of my mannerisms, some of the forms that I talk, I can directly relate to people that I know and love that are no longer on this plane of existence.
Right.
Where for me, it's almost an incorporation of their spirit into my spirit.
Right.
Even since I cannot sit and have coffee with them, I can feel them inside of them, more so than I did when we were on the physical plane.
I agree. Sometimes I hear my mom's voice come out of my mouth.
Oh,
no. Not now.
I have this one friend that had a divorce, and I found that in certain circumstances, I'll start doing the same click. And it's like, okay, his personality is coming into my subconscious. What is happening in this time frame that I'm needing some of his viewpoints in life that he shared with me.
Okay, good. So, it's the same thing, we're talking about elements surviving or acting independent of time and space as well, right? Because it's all the same. Time and space is the same things, acting without time and space are the same thing, right? Does it happen that way? Out in space, is there time and space? Out in space, is there time and space? It's kind of a redundant question, but it's, the people say no, right? There's not gravity. There isn't a concept of time and space. That the time and space the astronauts experience is not what we experience here on Earth. So, if we're in a different plane, then how does that change? Does it change? Does what Troward talks about change? It's just something, a food for thought, one of those things that really doesn't matter, but it's kind of like, if we really believe this, then we have to believe it in its totality, as Troward says, right? And I'm just trying to, pick at those things. It's like, we have to believe it in its totality in order for it to manifest, right? So can they manifest a new house if that's what they're thinking of over the 5 years they're floating around the Earth, right? Do they want a new house in space? I don't know. Do they want $50,000 to come floating? Can they manifest those things in that kind of time and space where they are? Does that matter? Is it how we view it? But, Jenny?
It is how we view it, but metaphysically, they don't need any of those things. But whatever they do want or need is instantaneous, is what you think you produce. But there are different dimensions, and I think if you talk about outside of Earth,
Okay.
you can still say there's different dimensions here too, so that sometimes, some people think that in another dimension, the people who have passed on that we love and miss are still right here, closer than you think. And they could be joining you right now, in another dimension. And often they are, because they will talk to people psychologically or, intuitively. You get communication in some form, psychically, whatever you want to call it. And it's very clear, and they're nearby. They also, though, have work to do and classes to go to. So they may not always be at your beck and call. They're busy, too. They don't just sit around wondering what you're doing.
So, in a parallel universe, yes, they're doing, you believe they're doing similar things?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let's end with this, and then we'll start we'll do the collection and the prayer and all of that and take the time. But nothing can be remote from us either in time or space or distance or in the future, which is what you're saying essentially. Nothing is remote, nothing is apart from us. And let's go with that thought as we reread chapter 1, and we'll cover chapters 1, 2, and 3 next week. And I want to give you my email and my phone number in case you want to get in touch with me. I'm going to be out of town until Tuesday, but feel free to call me. It's 775-354-6091. And my email is a little bit longer, but so 775-354-6091, and it's Catherine, KATHERENE.GTI@sbcglobal.net. And g.gti@sbcglobal.net. That's my email. So feel free to email me if you have any questions, any comments, or any direction you would like to see this to go. If you didn't finish your questions, please make sure I get them. Do your bookmark, please, and do the reading. Pardon? Oh, are there any other green pieces of paper? Well, you've got several. Okay.
They've got a bunch in the back there.
Yeah, I asked people to create a bookmark. What would you like to manifest in the next 8 weeks? And use it as a bookmark to your book. And continually read it every time you open your book. Different from the prosperity class. This is kind of like life manifesting, right? We're not going to come in the next week and say, oh, you know, I got a new Prius.
So you said you were gonna be out of town till Tuesday.
I am, but you can contact me, I'll be available.
So that means we're not gonna have class on Monday? Oh, this is Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay, well, never mind. There is no time and space.
Not right. It's the same thing. When you come
It's
Wednesday.
the other.
Oh,
The other Monday.
it's the other Monday.
I won't be
To take her home.
There is
And
The
there's,
short answer is no.
is there class on Monday? Is Barbara?
No, next Monday.
Next Monday. All right, well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. Okay. What do I do?
There are some questions as to the love offering and if Faith gave some of that, she is. Does that go towards your commitment? It does not. But it will go towards your taxes, for tax purposes, for anybody who's wondering.
Okay, yay, I didn't know.
Yay.
What I manifested.
Okay.
What do I do? I say it first? Oh. Okay. Is there a practitioner in the room?
Well, maybe you.
I thought you did the treatment, the blessing after the
You
procedure.
finished with the blessing, but to do a treatment, she always starts with the treatment.
You do it however you want.
It's your class. It's your class.
It's all about you.
Okay. I hope that the tape has been shut off. This is what I know, though. I know that whatever ends up in this basket is of spirit. And I know that there is, again, only spirit that flows in and through everything. That this discussion tonight was full of love and learning, integrity, and peace. And I know that this is what God is, and that this is what I am, and this is what everyone here present is that essence of spirit that is present, that is here now. and I am blessed. I am so grateful for the people here this evening. I'm grateful in knowing that there is joy that people received and gave, and that there is comfort in knowing that there is safety in knowing that God is all there is. And I pass this saying, and so it is.
And so it is.
Laughter is only love in motion. So, and with all of this, I am so grateful, I am so blessed. This is such a gift tonight, and this is just an energy symbol of what has happened here, and I know for me that it's just the biggest gift to be standing here in front of you, and so, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.